I'm a cop for the government's Department of Mysteries, and I've broken all the rules. I never should have opened that door. The moment I did, a chill ran down my spine. My heartbeat quickened. Every day, I patrol the bizarre corners of our reality, but walking into that room felt like stumbling off the edge of reason. Cold air wrapped around me like a shroud. The shadows flickered strangely, seeming almost alive. I was on an ordinary shift, collecting reports, shadows dancing across my peripheral vision. Just the usual, I thought. But this time was different. This time, there were whispers, soft and barely audible, echoes that implored me to listen. I shoved my hands into my pockets, trying to ground myself. The air smelled of dust, and something else, something metallic. Objects shifted in my periphery, and an unease settled in the pit of my stomach. I glanced around. Just the darkened room, but the atmosphere crackled with tension as if the walls were listening. My instincts screamed at me. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Then came the noise. A loud thud, reverberating through the empty hall. My heart raced. I edged closer, my breath hitching. I should have turned back. I know that now. But curiosity held me captive. Another thud, a whisper echoing in the back of my mind, drawing me forward. When I stepped in, I was met with darkness. My eyes adjusted slowly, and then I saw a figure, just beyond the threshold. A silhouette wrapped in shadows. My chest tightened. Who or what was it? The air stilled around me, thick and heavy that I stumbled backward, panic clawing at my throat. A whisper came again, sharper this time, calling my name. It felt like a scream trapped in my chest. I turned to flee, but the door slammed shut behind me with a force that echoed through my bones. And then, silence. My pulse thundered in my ears. The figure moved, gliding closer with an unnatural grace. I could see nothing but the outline, a noose tightening around my sanity. I was frozen. I knew I had broken the rules, and now I was going to pay for it. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button. It really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. Panic surged through my veins like ice as the figure drew closer, its form coiling with shadows that seemed to stretch and flicker in a grotesque ballet of darkness. I strained to discern its features, but the shape remained a turbulent storm of blackness, an anomaly that defied comprehension. I forced myself to breathe, to think. Why had I come here? This was not a place for officers of the Department of Mysteries. It was somewhere between worlds, a threshold that should never have been crossed. The silence was suffocating, the oppressive weight of the air thickening around me. The whispering escalated, turning from soft coaxing to urgent hissing, like a crowd of furious spectators pleading with me to understand something I could not grasp. My eyes darted, searching desperately for an escape, but every surface seemed alive, shifting subtly as if the room itself was a creature, breathing and pulsing. Leave the voice sliced through the air, a shuddering rasp that sent chills cascading down my spine. It was not the figure that spoke, but a chorus of voices layered upon one another, feminine, masculine, young, old, all twisted in a manner that invoked everything primal and terrifying I had ever felt. I couldn't tell if the words were meant for me or something lurking behind me. Before I could pivot, I felt a cold presence right at my back, malicious and searchlight bright in its intent. The air twisted, electrified with malevolence. A slow, towering dread filled me as I turned once more, adrenaline igniting each nerve in my body. The figure lingered, poised in anticipation, its shape taut against the darkness, as if a hunter stalking its prey. Why did you come? It cooed, the same voice echoing with a twisted kind of intimacy. I wanted to scream, to turn and flee, but the air thickened, coiling around my limbs, an invisible net holding me prisoner. The walls whispered my name in concert, moaning as if they felt my fear, drunk on it, feeding from it. What do you want? I croaked, the question surfacing through sheer desperation. But the figure simply watched, its featureless face unreadable, maintaining that same paralyzing stillness. The darkness convulsed suddenly. Objects began to shift, papers fluttered like trapped butterflies, and eerie shadows crawled across the walls. I felt Ida pulse, a throb beneath the floorboards, as if the very foundation of this room was alive, writhing with something demonic. My instincts screamed that I needed to escape, yet I was nailed in place, my voice strangled in a throaty knot. In an instant, that pulsing intensified, your heart reverberating through the confines of the room until it harmonized with the throbbing in my chest. My vision blurred, the edges of the room warping as an ominous fog began to close in. I could hear laughter, echoing down dark corridors I could not see, mocking and sinister symphony of insanity caressing my mind. The figure surged forward. In a frenzied gasp, I finally managed to wrench my legs into motion, darting sideways as I lunged for the door. But it felt so far away, as if the distance was mocking me. The tendrils of darkness slithered around my ankles, pulling me into their inescapable embrace. I clawed at the air, desperately reaching for the handle, but it remained blissfully just out of reach. Then, suddenly, the whispers crescendoed into a deafening roar, drowning out all reasoning as a blinding light erupted from the figure. It pulsated violently, rippling through the room with a force that knocked me flat against the floor. My vision went blazing white, consuming me entirely as I felt someone surge forward, pressing against my consciousness, threatening to unravel the fragile threads of my sanity. "That you should have known better," it screamed, the sound a seething cacophony that would haunt me forever. And then, mercifully but terrifyingly, darkness descended again, swallowing the light and the noise, leaving only a breath more oppressive than silence. Suddenly, the door behind me creaked open. I could feel a cold wind spilling through the opening, fresh air beckoning. I scrambled to my feet, heart hammering, and sprinted towards the threshold, only to find the room had shifted, folding in on itself. The doorway yawned wide, and in its place now lay a chasm abyss that seemed to promise freedom or destruction. As I stood at the brink, the figure emerged from the shadows one last time, its voice a crescendo vibrating through that void. "It's never over." And then, a hand emerged from the darkness, cold and unyielding, ready to drag me into the depths. I faltered, caught between choices yet to be made, and horror brewed within. With a final, desperate gasp, I lunged forward. I plunged into the darkness, the void swallowing me whole, the chill wrapping around me like a shroud. As I fell, the sensation was not one of descent, but of being thrust sideways through dimensions, twisting through an agonizing corridor that felt infinitely long. The howling whispers receded for a moment, muted by the overwhelming pressure. I clutched my head, feeling the weight of existence pressing down as if the cosmos itself sought to consume my very essence. Suddenly, the soft thud of my body meeting solid ground jolted me back. I landed hard on a surface slick with an unknown substance, the world around me shifting and pulsing. The air was heavy with the scent of decay, and something sharper, metallic blood. My heart raced, and I bolted upright, scanning my surroundings. The room bore a sickly luminescence, shadows cast by flickering lights that seemed more like the gasps of dying souls than actual illumination. The walls pulsed, mottled with a slick, organic coating, and the floor undulated, forming a grotesque parody of a breathing chest, rising and falling as if it were alive. My breath caught in my throat, panic clawing at my gut. "Where am I?" I whispered to myself, the sound barely escaping my lips, the word lost in a cacophony that began anew. A sharp laughter echoed in the space around me, disembodied and mocking, resigning me to a dreadful solitude that echoed within. Then I saw them figures dripping from the walls like wax, their faces contorted in perpetual agony, eyes wide with terror and mouths agape in silent screams. I staggered back, pressing against the shuddering surface as they writhed into a semblance of life, shadows blending grotesquely, slipping toward me in unnatural grace. "No, no," I gasped as they closed the distance, whispering incoherently in tones that reverberated through my skull. Each syllable felt like a dagger, embedding itself in my mind, rippling through the edges of my sanity. The familiar chorus that had haunted me before now flooded the space, drowning my thoughts, tearing at the edges of my memories words of unresolved anguish and death entwining with my very essence. The hand reached out from the mass, cold and clammy, fingers long and spindly, grasping toward my wrist. I recoiled, thrashing against the walls as the room narrowed around me, closing in as if trying to crush me into the pulsating ground. The laughter turned darker, deeper, wrapping around me like chains, each sound tying me tighter to this realm, to this fate. No, not like this, I shouted, scrambling on the slick surface, desperate, searching for an escape. But the figures pressed closer, their distorted faces revealing a glimpse of the horror that lay buried within one of them, the figure that had spoken before. Its form now a grotesque amalgamation of mouths and blackened eyes. Suddenly, the space convulsed violently, and the floor beneath me split apart, a yawning maw opening that threatened to devour everything in its wake. I felt the pull, the magnetic force trying to drag me back toward the very core of this nightmare. I glared into the abyss and screamed. No, with a visceral determination, I propelled myself forward, breaking through the line of thrashing figures, demolishing their grasp at the edges of my consciousness. I stumbled past them, a primal fear igniting my every instinct to survive. Don't let them take you, a soft voice whispered from deep within the fray. It pierced through the laughter, offering fleeting clarity amid chaos. I turned, momentarily caught in the gleam of a familiar face. Kim, my partner, lost to one of these horrors long before. Her eyes were wide, pleading, yet dulled by despair. Help! They're not real. You need to leave now, she rasped, her voice barely lifting above the torrent of disembodied wails. But just as I lunged toward her, the ground shuddered violently. The figures recoiled, forming a whirling vortex that unveiled a deeper darkness, a deeper terror. A new presence lurked at the periphery, its form an absentient, terrifying void of nothingness pulling at everything it touched. That I hesitated for one breath too long, the portal yawning wider, threatening to engulf us. Kim's face faltered, twisting in the throes of fear and regret. All at once, the acknowledgement swept through me, a moment of acceptance. Go, I shouted, but the words dissolved into despair as I felt the evil gaze upon me, its focus singular and intent. The shadows thickened, and the pressure returned, forcing down upon me as if the universe itself conspired to crush me. With a final, desperate act, I flung myself towards the pulsating light beyond the figures, drawing in every ounce of strength. A cacophony of screams erupted as the void snapped shut, trapping Kim and the grotesque forms. In that instant, I breached what felt like an invisible barrier, an escape that was both salvation and condemnation. I was pulled into a new realm, a world of starlit space, void of sound yet brimming with a heavy stillness, the dark edges of reality looming above. But in that silence, I felt it again, a heartbeat that wasn't my own, a knowledge whispering in tones too familiar. I'm watching you. Whirling around, trepidation churning in my gut, I faced the unending void before me, knowing this was only the beginning. And behind me, I could hear the tendrils of darkness clawing at the very fabric of reality once more, hungry for my return. Then, right there, I blinked. Standing before me, an outline emerging from the shadows. Familiar yet horrifying was the figure that had haunted my every breath. Its twisted grin frozen in place, it simply whispered, "Welcome back." And then, I understood. I wasn't free at all. The silence stretched like a taut wire, and the shadows seemed to congeal around me, breathing in time with the heartbeat that was no longer mine. The figure stepped closer, the features sharpening into a grotesque semblance of Kim, warped and twisted in the loom of nightmares, her smile dripping with malice, as if every ounce of warmth and familiarity had been leached from her essence. "Did you think you could escape?" she hissed, her voice dripping with honeyed venom. The stars behind her flickered, and the very air thickened, suffocating. Shadows from the void coiled around her, rippling and shuddering like live serpents eager to strike. That I stumbled back, my instincts screaming, "Run." But there was nowhere to run to. A cacophony erupted from the depths of the void, the laughter morphing into noises too unnatural to comprehend, a symphony of despair and madness. Tendrils of darkness lashed out, snaking around my ankles, pulling me down toward the pulsing heartbeat lurking in the interstice of existence. "No!" I cried, twisting away from the figure, now morphing and shifting like a mirage. It called for me, drawing on memories I had buried deep, weaving a web of illusion. "You can't leave me again," it cooed, echoing words once filled with love, now hollow and corrupted. With a primal scream, I kicked against the encroaching shadows, ripping free just enough to dart away. But the stars were fading, retreating, as if I were being swallowed whole by the abyss. Each pulse of the heart resonated louder, drowning out my fears, pulling me towards that frightful abyss where reality blurred into something entirely alien. The cosmic darkness pulsed with life, tendrils writhing as if to draw me back into its embrace. I could feel it beckoning, promising power, connection to something greater, a sense of belonging. Accept it, the echo of Kim coaxed, her form dissolving into shifting shadows. Together, we can be unstoppable. But just as despair began to nestle itself in the crevices of my heart, I truly remembered her, the joy, laughter, and the love we shared before the shadows stole her away. This wasn't my Kim. This was a manipulation of my memories. In a surge of defiance, I turned, desperate to focus on any love that remained in my heart. But the void surged forward, and reality twisted around me, forming grotesque shapes in my memory, a parade of lost souls clawing at the edges of existence, forcing familiar faces to float by countless others who had been consumed or had faded into the dark specter of the abyss. Each face spoke in a cacophony, a chorus crying out, lost yet somehow still bound to this realm, a litany of despair, a reminder of my own impending doom. Stumbling backwards, I lost my footing, tumbling into the darkness, my hands grappling for purchase on the slick surface again. The air changed. Rather than the putrid stench of decay, I caught a scent that was almost comforting, yet tainted fresh earth, and something else that sent a chill coursing through me. Beneath the oily slickness of the ground, I felt a rhythm, a pulse different from the heartbeat surrounding me. It thrummed with life and with death, and in the very core, I perceived them, shadows emerging unbidden, each one carrying the shape of a human, twisted in agony, as if reaching for salvation. I gasped as my hands slipped into the viscous layer beneath, and suddenly the surface beneath gave way further. The world shifted, and I was plunged deep into the heart of the darkness, in the suffocating silence. I hit the ground hard, gasping as the pressure mounted, forcing stale air into my lungs. With a sharp rattle, I turned my head just in time to see a mass of their faces swirling, me own reflection twisted grotesquely amidst their ranks, screaming silently, lost in the swell of shadowed forms. Each of them imprisoned, each longing for release, for vengeance. Desperation turned into hunger. Join us, they moaned, a unified voice penetrating my defenses, latching onto my identity, my scattered mind. Become one with us, I fought against their whispers, my heart pounding like a wild beast. In one final clash, I pushed against the fetid mass, forking my memories with a visceral determination, aiming each fleeting moment spent with Kim, each moment filled with warmth until their horrid shapes distorted further, fracturing, cracking around my essence. But just as I believed I had returned control, a shadow split from the horde, coursing toward me, gnarled fingers stretching out, clasping desperately as the abyss roared behind it. The malevolent echo of a familiar laughter filled the air, deep and foreboding, the rejection of my memories manifesting in the figure, its mouth contorting into a hideous grin that bore a visage horrifyingly pure. "It's so good to see you again," it crooned, its tone both silk and ice, wrapping around my mind, intensifying the shadows swirling about. I felt the walls of reality begin to crack, my identity teetering on the edge as the void beckoned me once more. And then I felt Ida tugging at my chest, a pull towards something sinister. My heartbeat synchronized with the darkness as it whispered its final promise. Choose. Just as the shadows threatened to engulf me completely, I stared into the abyss, knowing it was time to confront the terror waiting at its core. But what I found instead was not just a choice, but an ultimatum, an indelible knowing that the true horror of this fate was yet to be unveiled. With horror, I understood. What loomed behind the myriad of faces was a secret held deeper than I could fathom, and reaching toward it was akin to grasping fate itself. The truth lay there, threaded through the fabric of realistic choice I may never have had the power to make. Before the words could escape my lips, a blinding light erupted around me, and I was spiraling away once more into the void. As darkness embraced me, I heard it, a faint voice calling out from the depths as it unraveled into madness. "You can't outrun us. You can't escape." And right then, on the threshold of oblivion, a cold realization dawned on me. This was where I truly belonged. The sensation of falling was immediate and disorienting as I spiraled through the tumult of darkness. Each woeful breath filled my chest with the weight of 1,000 regrets, memories screaming their truths in my ears. The figures surrounding me twisted and writhed, their faces morphing from people I had known into grotesque prototypes of my worst fears. The cacophony of whispers crescendoed, muddling my thoughts, each voice a reminder of the lives I had loved and the terror that had now entwined itself with them. Fight. Resist. A voice shrieked amidst the turmoil, recognizable yet alien. It was faint, as if born from a distant past, desperation lacing the syllables. But as grounding as it was, the narrative piecing together in my mind began to fray, each thread threatening to unravel. Then, abruptly, I landed the unforgiving, damp ground, a stark contrast to the disorienting darkness. Groaning, I pushed myself upright, chest heaving in frantic gasps. The scene before me shifted slowly into focus, framed within a darkened grove lit by a haunting, ethereal glow. Shadows danced between trees that appeared to breathe, their gnarled roots twisting like the fingers of the damned reaching from the depths of the earth. Welcome home. A seductive whisper slithered through the trees, heavy with a mocking cadence. My senses sparked, igniting a primal need to flee. I turned, but the pathway behind me had vanished, cloaked in a creeping fog that swallowed its form. Where is this? I murmured, my voice hoarse, trembling with fear. Where you've always belonged. The voice taunted, now coming from all around, mingling with the sounds of rustling leaves and distant cries. The grotesque figures from before emerged from the shadows, their forms tangible and real, following the path of the faint light illuminating patches of soil beneath their feet. Images flashed violently through my mind, the fragmented memories of lost souls entwined with Kim's haunting visage, imprinted onto my memory like a dark tattoo. Each face I recognized bore witness to their own despair and denied faith. They were here, lurking just beyond my reach, waiting for the right moment to strike. Suddenly, the shifting light coalesced into a more defined form, silhouetted against the backdrop of the trees. A figure with elongated limbs crossed into view, adorned in rags that whispered secrets of ancient times. Its face was obscured, wrapped in shadows that shifted like liquid smoke as it loomed nearer, emitting a low, resonant hum that struck a chord deep within. Choose, it called, the word reverberating throughout the emptiness, echoing against the trembling bark of the trees. Will you embrace the cycle, or will you run from it? I understood the calling. I could feel it wrapping around my essence like a serpent, squeezing tighter with each pounding of my heart. In its depths, I could make out the silhouettes of those lost to the void, summoning me to join their ranks as one of the damned. Their cries transformed into a symphony of despair, rising high into the air, weaving thick tendrils of sorrow that promised to ensnare me forever. Kim, I shouted, the name erupting from my throat before I could stop myself, a desperate plea resonating with heartache. My voice trembled, hanging heavy among the ghostly figures. But the figure merely cocked its head to one side, darkness swirling around its face, counting the seconds until my resolve would wane. For a heartbeat, silence pressed down, thick and clammy, as if the world held its breath. The air shifted, a cold wind slashing through the grove, chasing the shadows momentarily away. In that fleeting instant, clarity came, shimmering like a mirage. I thought of Kim, of the laughter and light we had shared, and an ember ignited within me, a familiar warmth rising against the pervading chill. Then the moments collapsed upon themselves, and the figure surged forward, melding into a mass of pulsating shadows that embraced me, pulling me into its depths. The abyss opened wide, and as darkness wrapped around me, it whispered promises of release. But just as I felt my will begin to splinter, a chilling realization struck. The figures surrounding me weren't merely shadows. They were memories, echoes of every moment that had led to this point, and as they swirled, they revealed a path of shattered choices that I had to confront. Face us. Their voices howled as one, and I felt the grip of despair tightening, dragging me back into depths I'd thought I'd escaped. I thrashed against it, but there in the fabric of that ghastly sea, I saw it an apparition, a shimmering echo of Kim, her face warped yet achingly beautiful, lips parting to form urgent words, barely audible beneath the howls of the damned. Don't let them take you. You have to. Then she was swallowed, merging with the shadows amid anguished wails, while an unholy roar filled my ears, morphing into something primal, something more terrifying than the void itself. In my desperate attempt to hold onto the fleeting light that was her, I felt the shadows slipping through my fingers, a thousand whispers pooling around me once more. Then I was surrounded, enveloped in the dark cloak of despair. The void opened its maw wider. The choice twisted cruelly before me, and everything faded beneath the onslaught of their cries, their tortured, desperate thirst for my essence. Just as I felt my resolve fracturing, as resignation washed over me, the beating heart ignited, echoing the undeniable truth of the deeper darkness yet to be unveiled. And then, as the shadows converged, I saw Ida, gaping portal shimmering with darkness within darkness, breathing and pulsing like a living entity, beckoning me into the maw of a terror I did not yet understand. Dare you step into the unknown? It whispered silkily, wrapping tendrils of both fear and fascination around my heart. Then it was now or never, the last echo of my former life clinging desperately to existence as I stumbled toward the dreadful entrance, the shadows surging like a tide behind me, awaiting my choice. I took a breath, feeling terror, resilience, and all that I had lost surge in tandem, knowing nothing would ever be the same again. The darkness yawned wide, hungry and insatiable, as I crossed the threshold, the dizzying sensation of both falling and flying merging into one final gasp of an uncertain heartbeat. And then, just as I thought I would drown within that beckoning abyss, it shattered, unraveled by blinding light, leaving me to confront a truth more horrifying than any darkness I had faced. The light cascaded around me, shattering the darkness into a million shimmering shards. For an instant, I floated, weightless and untethered, immersed in the otherworldly illumination that cloaked me in warmth. But just as quickly as the euphoria washed over me, it began to shift, morphing into a scene that sent icy fingers crawling along my spine. I found myself standing in a dim corridor lined with rusty doors, each one adorned with strange symbols that twisted and coiled like living serpents. The walls pulsed with a low, oscillating hum, throbbing against the cavernous silence that threatened to swallow me whole. As panic tightened in my chest, I realized I was not alone. The air thickened with the presence of others, unseen entities lurking just beyond the edges of my vision, their breath palpable like a fog, hanging heavily in the ether. Choose wisely, a whisper flitted through the corridor, echoing like a reminder of something I had long suppressed. I turned, frantic, but the shadows seemed to bend and twist away from me, evading the light that surrounded my form, leaving me in a liminal space between knowing and ignorance. The air tasted of metal, sharp and acrid, mixing with the sweetness of something foul, like the rot of memories buried under layers of dark earth. I felt the oppressive weight of regret pressing down on me, the burdens of those I had failed swirling around, their names woven into the very fabric of my being. With mounting dread, I stepped forward, my feet dragging over the ground that felt alive, flexing beneath my weight. Each door loomed larger than the last, their handles slick and cold against my palm. Each whisper beckoned, drawing out images of the past, faces I had seen too late, lives I had touched but could not save. That I paused beside the first door, its surface pulsating in sync with my heartbeat. A shiver coursed through me as I pressed my ear against the slick wood. The muffled sounds of a child's laughter seeped through, bright and innocent, before shattering abruptly into screams of agony. My stomach twisted. I recoiled, stumbling backward, shaking off the phantom touch that felt all too real. "Do they call to you?" The disembodied voice cooed, slithering around my mind. "Each door is a choice, the weight of your decision anchored by the souls behind it." They were connected, these choices, I realized. A path to salvation or another spiral into despair, their burdens resting on my decision. The echoes of the past reverberated around me, and suddenly the portraits of those hauntingly familiar faces flashed in my mind's eye. People I had chosen to save, people I had chosen to abandon. "No," I gasped as I turned and faced the second door, its surface marred with deep gouges as if countless hands had clawed at it, desperate to escape. I reached out, fingers brushing against the door's surface, and a searing pain shot through my fingertips, igniting a memory I thought I had buried. Kim. I gasped, the name like a prayer on my lips. The door rippled, trembling under my touch as if recognizing the bond we shared. I felt her in the very marrow of my bones, a tether that spanned the vast chasm of despair and hope. She was here somewhere, lost yet unfound, waiting for me to open that door. But with that recognition came the shadows, swirling around the corridor in a frantic dance, their muted whispers coiling and intertwining, their presence thickening the air until each breath felt like inhaling smoke. The third door just beyond the second stood tall and dark, marked with secrets begging to be unearthed. Alone, we despise, the voice sang, its tone dipping into a deeper resonance, as if mocking my will. But together, we thrive in the labyrinth of your delusions. Before I could think further, images exploded in my mind. Terrifying snapshots of Kim intertwined with grotesque visions of the figures I had encountered earlier, twisted faces of betrayal, anguish, and despair, screaming for acknowledgement. My heart hammered in my chest, thrumming like a war drum against the insistent beat of the corridor. "No, I want to come," I shouted desperately, taking a step back from the oppressive call of the doors. I was a copa protector meant to confront the darkness, even as it loomed and threatened to engulf me whole. But even as I felt the tremors of resolve building within, I heard it again, a distant, echoing chorus of cries ruptured the silence, the voices melding into one haunting wail that swept through the corridor like a chilling wind. "To choose is to lose," the shadows hissed, and the lights flickered around me, plunging me into near-total darkness. Just as the unbearable weight of despair threatened to crush me, I heard it, Kim's voice echoing out from the depths of the shadows, clear and unyielding. "Find me," she cried, a shimmer of hope piercing through the veil. But it was immediately snuffed out under the tide of cacophony, the shadows surging forward, kissing the edges of my vision in a twisted, frenzied language that thrummed along my sanity. In the next moment, the corridor began to distort, twisting like a snake consuming its tail, the doors fading into swirling mist as the shadows surged, a tide of despair cloaking me in a smothering haze. My connection to Kim remained, but time was a fickle mistress. Surrender or be consumed. Came the chilling whisper as I staggered backward, losing my grip on reality, watching helplessly as the labyrinth dissolved around me, leaving only the unknown abyss to choose from. And then, from the encroaching darkness, I saw what I dreaded, a figure emerging, a ghostly silhouette stepping into view, its features blurring until I could make out the expression twisting my deepest fears. "Welcome back," it crooned, the once familiar voice tainted with dread, pulling the mist tighter and revealing an even more grotesque labyrinth of lost souls wrapped within itself. As terror settled into my core, I understood in that instance. The choice was no longer mine to make. The corridors began collapsing inward, swallowing the flickering light, a void circling closer, and as screams melded with laughter, I braced for the terrifying plunge into the depths of my nightmares, heart pounding wildly as I faced the reality that it was only just beginning. The darkness enveloped me, a heavy fog that pressed down with the weight of despair, coiling around my limbs like serpents in a pit. I could feel the temperature drop, the chill of the void sucking the warmth from my skin, leaving gooseflesh prickling along my arms. As I grasped desperately at the remnants of the corridor, each step backward felt as if I were wading through molasses, the heaviness of dread pulling me down into despair. The figure loomed larger, the contours sharpening to reveal a familiar face twisted into a macabre grin. It was Brent, my partner, the one who had stood by my side through countless darknesses before the day he vanished. Though I had buried his memory beneath layers of guilt and shame, there he was mirroring the anguish that clawed at me. "Did you really think you could escape me?" His voice dripped with mockery, heavy with the decay of all the moments I had failed to save him. "So many choices, and yet, here we stand. You never did understand the rules, did you?" But I thought my voice faltered, caught in the tempest of emotions surging within. Faces crashed over me in waves, the echoes of those lives intertwined with mine. The choices I had made, the lives I had failed to uphold. The shadows thickened, sharp laughter swirling in the air like cruel whispers dancing on the fringe of comprehension. I gritted my teeth, trying to summon the strength to push through. But Brent's smile widened as he stepped closer, revealing glistening teeth stained with the darkness of betrayal. each one a reminder of a world that had unraveled before my very eyes. What they don't tell you, he breathed, his voice a low hiss, is that every choice sculpts your fate, carving a path through the darkness. What do you think happens to you when you defy the department? When you choose the light over the shadows? The room began to swirl violently, each door turning into a swirling vortex of colors and screams, faces twisting and melding together like sculptures in a macabre gallery of sorrow, each with their stories of anguish written in their eyes. I could no longer see the lines of the corridor. I was adrift in a churning nightmare, the past crashing into the present with relentless ferocity. The air crackled with tension, a palpable energy that clouded my mind. You're here because you defied them all, Brent continued, unfazed by the chaos. You broke the rules, and now you're paying the price. As if summoned, the doors exploded outward, revealing moments frozen in tiny failures. The cries of those I couldn't save which rushed into me, drowning me in agony, and oh, I screamed, heart racing as I fought against the tide. But the shadows danced too cruelly, spiraling tighter around me, unfurling like ink spreading through water. Then came another voice, piercing through the fog, faint but distinct. Run. It was Kim again, a beacon of desperate hope amidst the agony. I felt it stirring in my core, a flicker igniting my will to escape. With newfound determination, I barred my eyes against Brent's terrifying visage, dashing toward the only door that appeared momentarily stably, a door that shimmered in agonizing shades of gray, an escape from the suffocating wave of darkness. As I reached for it, the laughter intensified, wrapping around me like a noose, dragging me back into the fold, and oh, you can't leave, Brent hissed, his voice echoing in a crescendo of anguish. You must choose to stay. You will forget. You will lose everything if you walk through that door. But the oppressive weight grew heavier, and as I shoved my shoulder against the door, it splintered open with a triumphant crack, a gust of wind rushing to meet my chance at freedom. Just as I stepped over the threshold, time warped again. The room collapsed in on itself. I glimpsed what lay ahead, a mirror, fractured and reflective, shimmering with fractured memories. And as the shards scattered, I saw faces swirling through the faces of every person I had encountered, each with hollow eyes filled with the unending darkness. No, I gasped, stumbling into chaos, struggling to keep my focus as my heart hammered in a rhythm too familiar. Yet just as I sharpened my gaze on a familiar smile lost in the chaos, the mirror shattered, splintering time and reality into shards of betrayal and misery. Suddenly, everything flipped, the ground beneath me giving way as screams erupted, the voice of Kim rippling through the abyss, faint yet insistent. Help me, please. Strapped upon the precipice of two worlds blurring wildly, I saw them, the souls trapped behind the glass, writhing, pleading, and then the darkness engulfed me entirely, leaving only the echoing whispers of desire and despair. Are you ready to choose? The voices sang, a chorus of entrapment that echoed as reality faded into the void. My mind raced, but before I could answer, the darkness surged as I clutched a fragment of light, only for it to dim, spiraling down to eternity. And then, I fell, surrounded by faces once more, Brent smirking, Kim crying out, the laughter of the shadows gliding over me like a terrible lullaby, each note pulling me deeper into the suffocating blackness. Swallowed whole by the unknown, I screamed, the abyss my only witness, as I plummeted into what felt like an infinite descent. I had made my choice, and in doing so, had just set the stage for even more horrific truths to unravel. And then, as I hit the ground with a bone-racking thud, the world cracked along its seams, and a new voice reached out, a low, guttural whisper that echoed through the darkness. Welcome to your nightmare. Awareness crashed back slowly, like a wave reluctantly retreating from the shore, leaving behind the remnants of its fury. My body lay pressed against something cold and unyielding, its surface rough, rippling beneath me as if it were alive. The air was thick with moisture, the scent of decay clung close, straining my lungs with each jagged breath. I blinked into the dim light, squinting against the oppressive darkness that melded into shadows, creeping along the walls like fingers trying to reclaim their lost hold. As I pushed myself up, a shudder racked through me, and I could feel the weight of countless eyes upon my back. watching me through the veil of gloom. "Is anyone there?" I croaked, the question barely escaping my lips as fear curled around my spine. The only response was silence, heavy and stifling, broken only by the distant echo of water dripping rhythmically. Thump, drip, thump, each drop a cruel reminder of time slipping away. My surroundings came into focus, revealing a narrow stone corridor lined with grotesque murals that twisted into disturbing figures, each one contorted in expressions of agony and despair. It was a gallery of lost souls, their mouths open in silent screams, their stories woven into the walls, each stroke of brush reflecting the horror they had faced. Before I could steady my mind, a flicker of movement caught my eye. I turned rapidly, adrenaline surging through my veins, but the corridor remained still, unyielding. Yet I could sense it, the shift in the air, the palpable shift of something lurking just out of sight, hiding amidst the stone labyrinth. "Hello?" I called again, my voice shaking as the feeling of dread seeped deeper, constricting my throat. That's when I noticed the floor. The moss-covered stones weren't just damp. They glistened with something darker, something viscous that slithered when I stepped closer, leaving trails as if something had been dragged through this very path. My heart thudded louder, urging me to retreat. But faint echoes of Kim's plea rippled through my mind, puncturing the cloud of despair that hung heavy. The weight of her desperation pushed me forward. I took a cautious step, and then another. Every movement was treacherous, the shadows growing thicker, curling around the edges of my vision like serpents waiting to strike. With each footfall, the whisper of hushed voices grew closer, murmuring secrets I couldn't decipher, probing my mind, unsettling my thoughts as they harmonized into a crescendo of despair. Suddenly, a cold breeze swept through the corridor. I recoiled, instinctively looking back, but nothing was there, just the endless maw of darkness beckoning me to turn away. I pressed onward, the whispers now tinged with an urgency, almost pleading. Help! The sound was clear this time, ripping through the darkness like lightning, and it was undeniably Kim's voice, filled with a raw and desperate need. Down here, please." Guided by instinct and fear, I darted down the winding path, heart racing as the corridors twisted infinitely around me. I plunged deeper, every step fracturing the silence around me, each glance back revealing nothing but the abyss behind. "Kim," I shouted, hoping my voice would reach her, a minor beacon in this sea of despair. My resolve danced precariously upon a thread, desperation already cutting into me, reminding me of the biblical stories of betrayals, one of which had started with a single step backward. And then I froze, my breath catching like a fish gasping for air. At the end of the corridor, faintly illuminated by an unnatural glow, was a door tall and foreboding, etched with symbols that seemed to writhe beneath the surface, pulsating with a life of their own, conveying a sense of foreboding I couldn't ignore. "Help me." Kim's voice echoed again, slightly louder now, but with a tinge of panic, morphing into something darker as a chill swept through the air. "Please. They're coming." Before I could formulate a response, the whispers rose again, a cacophony of distorted voices that rattled my bones, urging me to turn away, to go back. They warned of the door, the unknown lurking beyond it. But the call of Kim was insistent, fear lacing every syllable. As I stumbled forward, I reached the door, trembling fingers hovering over the ancient symbols that twisted into grotesque patterns. As I laid my palm against its surface, the world behind me trembled, a rumble creeping forth from the shadows as curtains of darkness rustled in agitation. "Open it." Kim's voice was raw now, every ounce of desperation clawing at my mind, but with it came weight, the responsibility of what lay beyond. There was something monstrous behind it, and as those thoughts collided, the door suddenly shuddered, rattling under the pressure of an unseen force. The whispers crescendoed around me, spitting desperate warnings in a language I couldn't decipher. The air grew thick with malice. My heart raced as I pressed harder, my resolve fracturing against the scratching tendrils of the darkness desperate to ensnare me. And that's when I heard a low, guttural growl emanating from the other side, a sound warped by the shadows, and the whispers turned to laughter, harsh and maniacal. They had been waiting for me. Before I could step back, the door swung open, introducing a blinding light that filled the corridor with the scent of smoke and decay, fracturing the shadows momentarily. Yet, before I could grasp what lay beyond, a hand shot through the threshold, slick with darkness, pulling me forward into the glowing maw. "Welcome to your choice," it echoed deep within my mind. a familiar tone swirling in the void of chaos and truth. In that instant, I was torn between the haunting wails of souls ensnared in torment and Kim's fading call, and the door slammed shut behind me with a deafening finality that echoed into eternity. There was no turning back now. I had stepped into the chaos. And as the light dimmed, a chilling realization enveloped Meth's hand still gripped my wrist, cold and unyielding as it began to pull me into a world I couldn't anticipate. With a final glance behind, I saw Brent's face in the shadows, twisted into an expression of malevolence, and the laughter grew louder, echoing all around me. "Welcome to your nightmare." I struggled against the relentless tide of shadows as they coiled around me, promising anguish and despair while whispering sweetly ensnared lies in my ears. The darkness felt alive, wrapping around my body like a tight shroud, constricting with a pulsing, insidious hunger. "You're never leaving," the voices reiterated, the harmony of tortured souls threading together in cacophony, as if orchestrated by a master conductor of chaos. But suddenly, there was a crack of fissure in the oppressive night that pulsed around me. A piercing light erupted from behind the deep abyss, cutting through the fog of torment that threatened to engulf everything I was. It beckoned to me, glowing with warmth and possibility, while the overwhelming darkness recoiled, hissing like a wounded beast. "Kim." I called into the void, a desperate prayer breaking through my fear, an invocation that both shattered and galvanized my resolve. "I'm coming." I lunged toward the brilliance, putting every ounce of strength into breaking free from the black tendrils that clung desperately to my limbs, dragging me backwards into eternal night. With one final burst of defiance, I tore free, flinging myself into the light. I felt it envelop me briefly, a fleeting taste of salvation before a cold hand grasped my ankle, dragging me back into the yawning maw of shadows. I screamed, twisting around to see Brent's twisted visage distorted in fury, a gaping void where his soul should have been. "You are a coward," he roared, pulling at me with venomous determination. "You will not escape the dark. It is what you were born into." As his grip tightened, the warmth of the light flickered, and I screamed again, not out of fear but out of desperation. I would not be his prisoner. I had to fight. Suddenly, amid the chaos, I felt the familiar essence of Kim pulsing through me, shimmering at the edges of my consciousness, illuminating my horror-stricken thoughts. She was still with me, and in that moment, I drove my willpower toward her, the tether of our bond sending a surge of energy through my body. "Kim," I cried one last time, channeling my fury into my voice as the darkness writhed around me and the light fought to break through, enveloping me more wholly. "I will find you." I imagined her face, the warmth of a smile I had lost, and the memories flooded over me in vibrance. Our moments together swept away the shadows, illuminating every dark crevice in my heart. Brent shrieked in fury as I wrested myself free from his grasp, finally pushing through the remaining darkness toward the bright call of her voice. I felt the shadows clawing at my heels, desperate to reclaim me into their suffocating abyss. But the light pushed me forward, invigorating my spirit, and for the first time, I felt the weight of my own defiance crashing against the despair. I pierced through into a vast expanse filled with blinding light, untethered and free, enveloped by warm the sanctuary beyond the twisted machinations of hellish laughter and despair. But as my vision adjusted, an undeniable dread washed over me. The hallway that spiraled out before me glistened with familiar symbols I could now recognize. I was back at the very place I had once tried to escape, and no, I whispered, realization slamming into me with irrevocable force. The truth I had sought, the final twist, my horror unveiled. The light could not protect me. It was merely a facade masking the heart of this nightmare, a prison built to keep souls locked away. Sliding to a halt, I turned to confront the shadows that had pursued me, now swirling into the forms of the lost, the very souls that had faced the same choices I had, their faces writhing with anguish, the mantra echoing once more in harmony as they stretched their hands towards me, each one painted with regret and yearning. "Join us," they whispered, their voices a haunting melody that reverberated through me. I stood still, inhaling deeply, the truth wrapping around me like a suffocating blanket. I had thought I could save Kim, But what if she was here too, trapped in this endless loop of choices? My heart clenched as I turned, scanning the wreckage of memories, the souls entwined in malevolence singing the songs of despair. They yearned to drag another into the void. The realization hit me breaking of the rules had not freed me. It had bound me deeper into this dark tapestry woven by the department, a chain dragging me toward a fate I could never escape. It's never over, a voice whispered from the shadows, a voice familiar yet harrowing. The very echo of the ones I could not save. The weight of despair settled heavily around my shoulders. I grasped that my existence would now be intertwined with theirs. I was not leading Kim to liberation. I was walking into a lifetime of mutual torment. I stumbled back, confusion seeping into my bones where once my resolve had burned brightly. A new understanding chilled my spirit, and just like that, the corridor shifted, the light flickering as the chains of darkness clinked ominously around me. I was not the one to uncover the mystery. I was the new piece of a horrific game, an unwitting pawn in a cycle spun by the Department of Nightmares. In the suffocating silence that surrounded me, the shadows seethed with laughter, and a voice echoed, its tone chillingly familiar. "Welcome back. You belong to us now," it crooned, pulling me deeper into the labyrinth of shadows. There, forever undone, I was consumed entirely, a new whisper lost among the broken echoes of anguish, locked into a horrifying reality devoid of escape. And deep in my heart, I understood the last truth that lingered like a cold breath on my neck. Death was merely the beginning of even greater horrors. All hope shattered, and I faded into darkness. The final truth sent ripples through my mind. It's never truly over. It just begins anew.